Welcome back to more of our On the Road to Gen Con coverage, and today we're going to be taking a look at a party game that I think is probably going to be one of the more popular party games at Gen Con this year. It's called Everything Ever.
Yeah, I'm already excited to bust this one out at Gen Con and play with people, to be honest.
And it says Everything Ever, the party game you've been preparing for your whole life.
I mean, you really have been. This is one of those, I don't know if I'd categorize it as useless knowledge, but it's not really a trivia game, but it almost kind of feels like one because it's relying on you naming things that you should probably know, at least, to start with. But then as other people go around the table naming things, it gets harder and harder and harder.
Yeah, we've done things like this on Chit Chat where we're going back and forth and you're like, say, naming a board game that starts with the letter M, and you go back and forth, and whoever freezes up.
Yeah, or road trips. We used to do it with actors. Name movies that the actors have been in.
Exactly.
That whole premise has been gamified here in this game.
Yeah, so basically it's very simple. In the middle of the table, you have a variable number of cards depending on player count, and you flip over 2 of them, and everyone else gets 3 cards that are very similar. But we're starting here with every movie titled The Blank and every insect. Now, the way this goes is on your turn, you have to name a thing for each of those cards. So there's a little bit of pressure. The rules are a little flexible.
It's a party game.
It's a party game, so don't get all hung up on being a stickler with rules, but someone at the table can start a 10-second countdown and stuff like that. The gist of it is that you have to very quickly have an answer for both of these. For instance, every movie that starts with the Big Short, insect, caterpillar. Those would be successful, and now it's Ryan's turn.
Yeah, it goes around the table like that. However, you can kind of throw a wrench in things. If you can come up with one word that fulfills both categories, you actually get a little bit of a bonus, and the game gets a little harder. So for this one, I could say a movie. There's a movie called The Fly. A fly is an insect.
Yes.
It fulfills both categories. Now, if you can manage to do that, you can get rid of one of the penalties that's sitting in front of you. And again, this is kind of one of those party game things where you rely on other people at the table. You actually have a card that says hey, I don't know if that was exactly right.
You can call shenanigans. If someone gets a little gets a little sketchy on one of their clues or answers, you can say, I'll allow it, but watch yourself, counselor.
Yeah.
And that card stays in front of them until another time they get a little sketchy or shenanigans come out. Anyone else at the table can go, and then flip over that card and it says you're out of order, and then they take a penalty. The other way you're going to take a penalty is if you get it, it's your turn, and you're like, okay, a movie titled The Big Short, and then insect, you're just out of insects. You can't think of one because it's gone around the table so much that everyone's named all the insects you can. You either take a penalty and have to take not only this card, but any cards beneath it, or you can take one of the cards out of your hand and add this and answer it. So I've changed it to every pie. And I say apple. And it goes back and keeps going around the table. Now, as you can see, I've added some here. So if someone gets to a point where they can't name a pie, they don't just take that card. They take all the cards in that stack as penalties. And at the end of the game, when you're through all these cards, whoever has the fewest penalties wins the game. That's it.
Yeah, the game does get harder as you go. Like I mentioned, if you do name an answer that fits both categories, you can get rid of a penalty. You'll also add a third card to the mix, and now each player has to name 3 things. And now finding something that fits all 3 categories is probably going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, that can be tricky. There's some options there. You can, like Ryan said, you can either get rid of one of your penalty cards, or you get to take another card into your hand so that you have another backup card, in which case you add another card to the display. So it's a very fast-paced, tense game, but one of those ones where you have fun with that tension. And it's one of those ones where you look at the cards, and if you have all the time in the world, pie, pumpkin, apple, blah, blah, you're going to list them all off.
Right.
But when it goes around the table, it's very tense. Not to mention, what you're not thinking about right now, or maybe you are, is I'm like, okay, it's going around the table. I know I'm going to say pecan pie when it comes to me. Ryan goes, and he says pecan. And then I'm like,
pecan pie.
Because I was going to say pecan pie, and now you're kind of on tilt, and you can't think of one.
Well, it's very funny the way that your brain works when you're in those situations, because it just shuts down. All that you can think of is pecan pie. You might have had blueberry pie for breakfast,
right?
But you're thinking
there
about
may be blueberry pie on the table. And someone might say pecan, and you're just thinking, all I was going to say is pecan.
Right. It's very interesting, I think, the way that they took this premise, a game that people probably are familiar with, and they really turned it into a fun experience. And I think this is going to be a big hit at Gen Con, especially it's like $25.
Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, that's not a big ask for a
There's a
party game.
lot of cards in here
Yeah.
too, and I can say in just a few times we've played, I've already seen some situations where both cards, like the and insect, comes up where there is a possibility to have one answer that answers both.
Yeah.
It doesn't come up often, but I think it will happen. You'll be surprised at how
Was there a
frequently
movie
that does
called The
happen.
Blueberry?
The blueberry? Man, I don't
Yeah,
think
that's
so.
one of those all.
The
Maybe,
pecan.
I don't know.
Right, exactly.
I think there was a movie called The Pecan, 1984.
It is interesting because some of these cards you'll see, and you guys can go around the table for quite a bit of time
Sure.
because it's a long list of things, like birds, and you can name all sorts of different birds and stuff like that. But then eventually someone just kind of blanks,
Yeah.
and you kind of have to move on. But anyway, that is everything ever. This is from Floodgate. Be sure to check out their booth and go over there. My guess is that it's a small little box.
Yeah, they'll probably have a
They'll
bunch,
probably
but-
have a bunch of these, but this I think is going to be probably one of the hit party games at Gen Con. If you have any other questions about the game, I'm not sure what questions those could possibly be after this wonderful description we've given you. But please make them in the comments below. And until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.